The fluorescent lights of Bernie's diner buzzed like dying insects, casting a sickly yellow glow over the cracked vinyl booths and scuffed linoleum floor. Outside, Chicago's South Side shivered under a brutal late February wind that rattled the windows and sent icy rain slashing against the glass. It was the kind of night that kept most people indoors, huddled under blankets with the heat turned up high, a luxury Ethan Parker could no longer afford. Ethan stood behind the counter, methodically wiping down the coffee-stained surface with a rag that had seen better days, probably around the same time the diner had. His reflection in the grimy window showed a man who looked older than his 31 years, dark circles under his gray eyes, stubble he couldn't afford to shave properly, and a weariness that had settled into his bones like the Chicago cold. The diner was empty except for Marcus, the night cook, who was in the back listening to a Bulls game on a transistor radio held together with duct tape. The smell of old grease and burnt coffee hung in the air, mixing with the faint scent of bleach Ethan had used to mop the floors an hour ago. "Hey, Parker," Marcus called from the kitchen. "You heading out soon? I'm locking up in 20. "Yeah," Ethan called back, his voice rough from 12 hours of forced politeness to customers who tipped in quarters. "Just finishing up." He reached into his apron pocket and pulled out the crumpled bills and coins from tonight's tips, spreading them on the counter under the harsh light. His hands, red and raw from washing dishes during the dinner rush when the dishwasher had called in sick again, moved automatically, sorting the money into small piles. $3 bills, 7 quarters, a dime, 2 pennies, $4.87. Ethan felt something twist in his chest, not quite panic, not quite resignation. Something in between that he'd become familiar with over the past 6 months since losing his construction job when the company went bankrupt. He'd gone from making $45,000 a year to scraping together maybe $1,200 a month, and that was on good weeks. He added the tips to the $23.16 in his wallet. $28.03. That was everything he had in the world until Friday, 3 days away when his next paycheck would come. A paycheck that would be immediately swallowed by the $850 he owed in back rent. The eviction notice was still folded in his back pocket. He'd received it this morning, slipped under the door of his studio apartment in a building that smelled like mildew and defeat. 72 hours to pay or get out. Mrs. Chen, his landlord, had been patient. More patient than she should have been, but everyone had limits. Ethan closed his eyes and did the mental math he'd been doing obsessively for weeks. His phone had been shut off 2 weeks ago. $65 a month he couldn't justify anymore. He'd been walking the 4 miles to work instead of taking the L to save the $3 each way. He'd been eating the diner's leftover food that would otherwise get thrown out, day-old biscuits, soup that had sat too long, the ends of meatloaf that weren't pretty enough to serve. Pride was a luxury he'd given up around the same time as his phone service. The wind howled outside, driving the rain harder against the windows. Ethan glanced at the clock, 11:47 p.m. Marcus would want to leave by midnight, maybe earlier given the weather. Ethan needed to get home before the storm got worse, before the temperature dropped another 10 degrees like the forecast predicted. He was pulling off his stained apron when the bell above the door chimed. Ethan looked up, surprised. Nobody came to Bernie's diner this late on a night like this. The few regulars who might brave the weather had already come and gone hours ago. The woman who stepped inside looked like she'd been through a war. She was young, mid-20s maybe, with dark hair plastered to her face and shoulders dripping onto the already wet floor. Her clothes, what Ethan could see of them under a thin jacket that was wholly inadequate for the weather, were soaked through. But it wasn't just the rain that made her look like a disaster. There was a wild, haunted quality to her eyes as they swept the diner, checking every corner, every shadow. Her hands trembled, though whether from cold or fear, Ethan couldn't tell. There was a bruise forming on her left cheekbone, dark purple against pale skin, a split lip, barely scabbed over, scratches on her hands. She moved like someone being hunted. "We're about to close," Ethan said, but his voice was gentle. He'd seen enough desperate people in this neighborhood to recognize one when he saw her. The woman's eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, Ethan saw something flicker there. Calculation, assessment, decision. She was reading him the same way he was reading her. Her voice was hoarse, carefully controlled despite the tremor in her hands. "Just something hot. Coffee, please." She had an accent that Ethan couldn't quite place. Not from Chicago, definitely. East Coast, maybe? But refined, educated, at odds with her current state. This was someone who'd fallen far and fast. Yeah, okay, Ethan said, already reaching for a clean mug. Come on, sit down. You look frozen. She hesitated at the counter, then slid onto one of the red vinyl stools, her movements careful like everything hurt. Up close, Ethan could see she was shaking badly. Her lips had a bluish tint. Hypothermia, maybe, if she'd been out in this weather long. He poured the coffee, fresh pot, not the sludge that had been sitting for hours, and set it in front of her with both hands, like an offering. Thank you, she whispered, wrapping her fingers around the mug like it was a lifeline. Ethan grabbed a clean towel from under the counter and set it beside her. For your hair, he said. You're soaked. She looked at the towel like she couldn't quite believe it was real, then slowly picked it up and pressed it against her dripping hair. That's kind of you. Not really. Can't have you catching pneumonia in my section. Ethan tried for a light tone, but he was watching her carefully. The way she kept glancing at the door, the way she positioned herself on the stool so she could see both the entrance and the back exit, the way her hand kept moving toward her jacket pocket before stopping herself. This woman was running from something, or someone. You want anything to eat? Ethan asked. Kitchen's technically closed, but I can make you a sandwich. Or there's soup. Vegetable beef made fresh this morning. No, she said too quickly. No, I don't. I can't. She trailed off, and Ethan saw her jaw tighten. Pride. He recognized it because he'd been choking on his own for months. The pride that made you refuse help even when you were drowning. Just the coffee, she said firmly. How much? $2.50. He watched as she carefully pulled a small, wet wallet from her jacket pocket. Her hands were still shaking as she opened it, and Ethan caught a glimpse of what was inside. A $5 bill. That was it. No credit cards, no ID that he could see. Just $5. As wet as everything else about her. $5. Probably all she had, just like the $28 in his wallet was all he had. She was staring at that $5 bill like it represented an impossible decision. When did you last eat? Ethan asked quietly. Her eyes snapped up to his, defensive. That's not when, he repeated, and there was no judgment in his voice, just recognition, one struggling person to another. She closed her eyes. Yesterday, maybe the day before, I don't. Yeah, Ethan said. He understood that too. When you were hungry long enough, the days started blurring together. He made a decision. Marcus, he called toward the kitchen. I'm making a to-go order before we close. That okay? Make it fast, Parker. I want to get home before this shit gets worse, Marcus yelled back. Ethan moved into the kitchen, his heart pounding with the awareness of what he was about to do. The soup was still warm in the industrial pot on the stove. He ladled out a generous portion into a large styrofoam container, added 2 thick slices of the wheat bread that Bernie's made daily, wrapped up a piece of the apple pie that hadn't sold, and grabbed a bottle of water from the cooler. It was more food than one person needed for a meal. It was enough for 2 days if you stretched it. It was also going to cost him his last bit of money. Marcus looked over from where he was cleaning the grill. She paying for that? Yeah, Ethan lied. She is. He bagged everything carefully, adding napkins, a plastic spoon, salt and pepper packets. When he came back out to the counter, the woman was still sitting there, still clutching that mug of coffee like it was the only solid thing in her world. Here, Ethan said, setting the bag on the counter. She stared at it. I said just coffee. I know what you said. Ethan rang up the order on the ancient register. Soup, bread, pie, water. $12.47. He reached into his wallet and pulled out a 20, made change for himself, put the bills in the register, pocketed the coins. $7.53. That's what he had left now. The woman was watching him with an expression he couldn't read. Why would you? It's food, Ethan said simply. You need it. I have it. Not complicated. Everything's complicated, she said, and there was a weight to those words that spoke of a life Ethan couldn't imagine. Maybe, he conceded, but this doesn't have to be. She looked at him for a long moment, and Ethan had the strange sensation of being truly seen, not as a waiter, not as part of the scenery, but as a person. It had been a long time since anyone had looked at him like that. What's your name? She asked. Ethan. Ethan Parker. Ethan Parker, she repeated like she was committing it to memory. Why did you do this? Really? He thought about it, about all the reasons he could give. Because he'd been hungry before. Because he knew what it was like to count change and come up short. Because the world was cold enough without people making it colder. Because I could, he said finally. That's all. Sometimes that's enough. She stood slowly, picking up the bag with a care that suggested she understood exactly how precious it was. She still hadn't paid for the coffee, and Ethan wasn't going to ask. The $2.50 was already covered by what he'd put in the register. "Ethan Parker," she said again. "I won't forget this." "You don't have to remember it," Ethan said. "Just stay warm, stay safe." Something flickered across her face. Pain, maybe, or regret. "Safe," she murmured. "That's not really possible for me." Before Ethan could ask what she meant, she was moving toward the door. She paused with her hand on the handle, looking back at him one last time. "Thank you," she said, and there was a depth to those two words that made Ethan's chest ache. "You're a good man. There aren't many of those left." Then she was gone, disappearing into the rain and darkness, the bell above the door chiming softly in her wake. Ethan stood there for a moment, staring at the empty space where she'd been. He had no idea who she was, where she was going, or what she was running from. He would probably never see her again. That was fine. He didn't do it for gratitude or recognition. He did it because when you've got nothing left, sometimes the only thing that makes you feel human is giving what little you have to someone who needs it more. "She gone?" Marcus emerged from the kitchen, already in his heavy coat. "Yeah," Ethan said. "She's gone." "You charge her?" Ethan thought about lying, but he was too tired. "I covered it." Marcus shook his head. "Man, you can't be doing that. Bernie finds out you're giving away food." "Bernie's not here at midnight on a Tuesday in February," Ethan said. "And I didn't give it away, I bought it. There's a difference." "Not to your wallet, there isn't." But Marcus's voice was gentle. He'd worked at Bernie's for 15 years. He'd seen his share of desperate people too. "You got enough to get home? To eat tomorrow?" "I'm fine," Ethan lied. "Parker, I'm fine, Marcus. Really. Let's just lock up." They went through the closing routine in silence. Lights off, register counted, doors locked, alarm set. Marcus offered Ethan a ride, like he did most nights. And like most nights, Ethan refused. Marcus lived in the opposite direction, and gas cost money. "It's coming down hard out there," Marcus warned, looking at the rain that had turned to sleet. "You sure?" 4 miles. I've walked it in worse." "Your funeral, man. See you tomorrow?" "Yeah, tomorrow." Ethan pulled his thin jacket tight and stepped out into the night. The wind hit him like a physical blow, and within seconds the sleet was soaking through his clothes. He put his head down and started walking. 4 miles. About an hour and 20 minutes at a good pace, longer in this weather. He had to walk because the $7.53 in his pocket had to last until Friday, and the L cost $3 each way. He had to make it stretch for food, for what? His tired mind asked. "You can't pay rent. You're getting evicted anyway. Why does it matter?" But it did matter. Somehow, it always mattered. You kept going because the alternative was giving up, and Ethan had never learned how to do that. The streets were empty, everyone with sense tucked away somewhere warm. Ethan walked past closed storefronts, past apartment buildings where lights glowed in windows like little boxes of warmth he'd never be able to afford again. His feet were numb in his worn sneakers. His hands ached with cold even jammed in his pockets. He thought about the woman, wondered where she was now, if she'd found somewhere to shelter, if the food he'd bought her would help, if she was as alone as she'd seemed. Probably he'd never know. That was okay. Some acts of kindness were complete in themselves, requiring nothing more than the doing. By the time Ethan reached his apartment building, a 4-story brick structure that had been declining since the 70s, his teeth were chattering so hard he could barely fit the key in the lock. He climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, leaving wet footprints on the stained carpet, and let himself into the studio apartment that might not be his in 72 hours. It was barely warmer inside than outside. He'd been keeping the heat off to save money, using the ancient radiator only when absolutely necessary. He turned it on now just a little and peeled off his soaked clothes. He had one towel, thin and scratchy. He dried off as best he could and pulled on the sweatpants and hoodie he'd been sleeping in. His stomach growled loud in the quiet apartment. He went to the tiny kitchen area, really just a hot plate and a mini fridge in the corner, and opened the refrigerator. Half a carton of milk that would go bad tomorrow, 3 eggs, a wizened apple, mustard. He'd given away his last dollar on a stranger, and now he had $7.53 to last 3 days. Ethan closed the refrigerator and sat down on the edge of his unmade bed. The eviction notice was still in his jeans pocket, getting soaked along with everything else. He didn't need to read it. He knew every word by heart. For just a moment, he let himself feel the weight of it all. The exhaustion, the fear, the knowledge that he was failing at the basic human task of keeping a roof over his head. Then he thought about the woman again, about the bruises on her face and the haunted look in her eyes, about how she'd clutched that coffee mug like it was salvation. Whatever problems Ethan had, whatever he was facing, at least he wasn't running from something that put bruises on his face and terror in his eyes. At least he'd been able to help someone, even if he couldn't help himself. That had to count for something. Ethan lay back on the bed, pulling the thin blanket over himself. The radiator clanked and hissed, pushing out minimal heat. Outside, the sleet turned to snow, beginning to coat the city in white. Chicago in winter was beautiful and brutal in equal measure. He closed his eyes, already dreading the alarm that would go off in 6 hours for his breakfast shift. His body ached. His future was uncertain. His bank account was effectively empty. But he'd done something good tonight. In a world that felt increasingly cold and cruel, he'd offered warmth to someone who needed it. As Ethan drifted toward sleep, he had no idea that the simple act of kindness had just changed his life forever. He had no idea that the woman he'd helped wasn't just any stranger. He had no idea that in less than 12 hours, his entire world would be turned upside down. For now, he slept and dreamed of warmer days. The next morning came too soon. The alarm on Ethan's dying phone, he'd charged it at work yesterday, went off at 5:30 a.m. He groaned and rolled over, every muscle protesting. The apartment was freezing again. The radiator had shut off sometime during the night, probably on a timer he couldn't control. He forced himself up, shivering, and looked outside. The snow had stopped, leaving Chicago under a fresh blanket of white that would turn to gray slush by noon. The sky was that peculiar pale color it got in winter, pregnant with the promise of more snow. Ethan's morning routine was efficient, born of necessity. He showered in lukewarm water. Hot water cost extra on the heating bill. He shaved with a disposable razor he'd been using for 2 weeks too long. He dressed in his other work outfit, black pants with a patch on the knee, white button-down shirt that was more gray than white from too many washes. He cracked the 3 eggs into a pan on the hot plate and ate them with the apple, saving the milk for coffee at work. Breakfast of champions, he thought without humor. By 6:15 he was walking back toward Bernie's diner, retracing the route he'd taken just 7 hours ago. The morning was brutally cold, the kind of cold that hurt your lungs when you breathed. But at least it wasn't raining. The diner was already open when Ethan arrived, warm light spilling onto the sidewalk. Betty, the morning waitress, was handling the early crowd, construction workers grabbing coffee before their shifts, a few insomniacs, the regulars who came for Bernie's famous hash browns. "Morning, Parker," Betty called as Ethan came in. She was 60, tough as nails, and had been working at Bernie's longer than Ethan had been alive. "You look like hell." "Feel like it too," Ethan said, heading for the back to stow his jacket. "Slow night?" "Dead." "You?" "Same." He poured himself coffee, the employee perk that made the job almost worthwhile, and got to work. The morning shift was always busy, a blur of orders and refills and plates balanced on one arm. Ethan fell into the rhythm of it, the familiar dance of service work that required just enough attention to keep him from thinking too hard about his problems. At 9:30, during a brief lull, Bernie himself came in through the back door. Bernie Kowalski was 72, a former Marine who'd bought the diner in 1982 and had been running it the same way ever since. He was tough but fair, and he paid on time, which made him better than half the employers in Chicago. "Parker," Bernie called. "My office." "Now." Ethan's stomach dropped. Had Marcus said something about last night? Had Bernie somehow found out about the food? He followed Bernie into the cramped office that smelled like cigar smoke and old paper. Bernie sat down behind his cluttered desk and gestured for Ethan to close the door. "I'm going to ask you something," Bernie said without preamble, "and I want a straight answer." "Okay," Ethan said carefully. "You in some kind of trouble?" Ethan blinked. "What?" "No." "Why?" Bernie studied him with sharp blue eyes that had seen a lot in 72 years. "There were people here this morning, before we opened, asking about you." Ice water flooded Ethan's veins. "What people?" "Men. 3 of them. Expensive suits, expensive car. Not from around here. They wanted to know about the night shift, about who worked last night, about you specifically." Bernie leaned forward. "So I'm asking again. You in some kind of trouble? You owe money to someone you shouldn't?" Ethan's mind was racing. "No, I don't. I have no idea what you're talking about." I don't owe anyone except my landlord, and she's not sending guys in suits. These weren't collection agents, Bernie said grimly. I've seen collection agents. These were something else, something. He trailed off, searching for the word. Dangerous. The woman. It had to be connected to the woman from last night. Bernie, I swear to God, I don't know what this is about. Bernie watched him for another long moment, then nodded slowly. I believe you. But Parker, whatever this is, be careful. Those men, they weren't here to chat. They were looking for something. Or someone. What did you tell them? That you work the night shift Tuesday through Saturday. That you're a good employee. That I don't know anything about your personal life because you keep to yourself. Bernie's expression softened slightly. Which is true. You've been working here 9 months and I don't know a damn thing about you except that you show up on time and don't steal. That's all there is to know, Ethan said. Bullshit. Everyone's got a story. Bernie waved a hand. But that's your business. Just watch yourself, and if you need help, real help, you ask. Got it? Got it. Thanks, Bernie. Ethan went back to work, but his hands were shaking as he poured coffee and took orders. Men in suits, asking about him. Dangerous men. What had he gotten himself into? The shift crawled by. Every time the bell above the door chimed, Ethan looked up, half expecting to see those men Bernie had described. But the hours passed normally. The lunch rush, the afternoon slowdown, the dinner prep. At 4:30, just as Ethan was setting up for the dinner shift, the bell chimed again. Ethan looked up, and his world stopped. The woman from last night stood in the doorway, but she was transformed. Gone were the soaked clothes and desperate appearance. She was wearing a tailored black coat that probably cost more than Ethan made in 3 months. Her dark hair was styled perfectly. Her makeup concealed the bruises he'd seen, and she carried herself with a confidence that seemed to fill the entire diner. But it was the men behind her that made Ethan's blood run cold. 4 of them, all in dark suits, all with the kind of faces that said they'd seen violence and wouldn't hesitate to employ more. They weren't obviously armed, but Ethan would bet his last $7 that they were. The diner went quiet. The handful of customers sensed something happening, something off. The woman's eyes found Ethan's and she smiled. It was a small smile, but it transformed her face. Hello, Ethan, she said, and her voice was different too. Stronger, clearer, carrying an authority that made it clear she was used to being obeyed. We need to talk. Betty appeared at Ethan's elbow, protective and fierce despite being half the size of the men who'd just walked in. Sir, is there a problem here? The woman's attention shifted to Betty, and something in her expression made the older waitress take a half step back. No problem, the woman said pleasantly. I just need a few minutes with Mr. Parker. Privately. Ethan? Betty asked, looking at him with concern. Ethan's mind was spinning, but one thought rose above the chaos. Running wouldn't help. Whatever this was, it had already found him. It's okay, Betty, he heard himself say. I'll handle it. You sure? Yeah. The woman gestured toward one of the booths in the back away from the windows. Shall we? Ethan untied his apron with numb fingers and followed her, acutely aware of the 4 men positioning themselves at strategic points around the diner. 2 by the door, 1 by the kitchen entrance, 1 by the back exit. Professional, military-level professional. They slid into the booth and the woman folded her hands on the table, looking at Ethan with an intensity that made him want to squirm. I imagine you have questions, she said. A few, Ethan managed, starting with who the hell are you? My name is Ava Monroe, she said, and I'm here because last night you showed me a kindness that very few people in this world would have. She paused. You spent your last dollar on a stranger. Why? How do you know it was my last dollar? Because I make it my business to know things, Ethan Parker. Born March 15, 1994, in Cleveland, Ohio. Moved to Chicago 5 years ago for construction work. Lost your job when Hendricks Construction went bankrupt. Been working at Bernie's Diner for 9 months behind on rent. Phone shut off. No family to speak of. Her eyes never left his face. You're barely surviving. So I'll ask again. Why did you help me? Ethan felt exposed, vulnerable in a way that had nothing to do with the armed men surrounding them. Because you needed help. That's it? That's the only reason? What other reason would there be? Ava laughed, and it was a sound without much humor. In my experience, Ethan, everyone wants something. Money, power, favors, leverage, but you? She shook her head. You asked for nothing. Expected nothing. You just helped. So what? Ethan said, finding his spine. You came here with an army to say thank you? You could have just left a nice review online. That got a genuine smile. Not an army, security. And I'm not here to say thank you, although I am grateful. I'm here because that act of kindness last night saved my life. What? I was running from people who wanted me dead, Ava said simply. I'd been on the move for 18 hours. No food, no sleep. Fighting off an assassination attempt that killed 3 of my people. She paused, and for just a moment Ethan saw a flash of the vulnerable woman from last night. I was at the end, and then you fed me, gave me warmth, asked for nothing. Who are you? Ethan whispered. Ava Monroe looked at him with eyes that had seen too much for someone so young. I'm someone very dangerous, Ethan. Someone most people fear. And I'm here to repay a debt. I don't want your money. Good. Because I'm not offering money. She leaned forward. I'm offering you protection, a job, a way out of the life that's crushing you. I'm offering you a choice. And if I say no, then you walk away. Go back to your shift. Pretend this never happened. And in 72 hours you'll be homeless. Her voice was matter-of-fact, not cruel. Or you can say yes. And everything changes. You still haven't told me who you are. I know. Ava stood, and her men immediately shifted, ready to move. Come with me, Ethan. Let me show you instead. And then you can decide. She held out her hand. Ethan looked at it, at this beautiful, dangerous woman who'd appeared in his life like a storm, and knew this was a crossroads. One path led back to the familiar struggle. The other led, where? Into something unknown. Possibly worse. Possibly better. He thought about his $7.53, about the eviction notice, about the endless grind of survival with no hope of anything better. He thought about the look in her eyes last night when he'd given her that food. Ethan Parker took her hand. Show me, he said. Ava Monroe smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through storm clouds. Good choice, Ethan, come on. Your life starts now. As they walked toward the door, past the shocked faces of Betty and the customers, past Bernie, who was watching from the kitchen window with an expression Ethan couldn't read, he had one last moment of doubt. What am I doing? Then they stepped outside, where a black Mercedes was waiting, and Ethan Parker's old life ended. His new one, dangerous, impossible, and utterly transformed, was about to begin. The Mercedes smelled like leather and money, 2 things Ethan had little experience with. He sat in the back seat, acutely aware of the bodyguard beside him and another in the passenger seat. Ava sat across from him, her expression unreadable as Chicago's South Side rolled past the tinted windows. Nobody spoke. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. The rational part of his brain, the part that had kept him alive through poverty and hardship, was screaming that he'd made a terrible mistake. He'd just gotten into a car with armed strangers. He hadn't told anyone where he was going. He had no phone, no way to call for help. But another part of him, the part that had been slowly dying under the weight of endless struggle, felt something he hadn't felt in months. Curiosity, maybe even hope. Where are we going? He asked, breaking the silence. Somewhere we can talk properly, Ava said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes never stopped moving, watching the streets, the cars around them, everything. Always alert, always calculating. They drove north, leaving behind the rundown neighborhoods Ethan knew intimately. The buildings got taller, cleaner, more expensive. They passed through the Loop, where tourists wandered even in February's cold, and continued toward the lakefront where glass and steel towers pierced the gray sky. The Mercedes pulled into an underground parking garage beneath one of those towers, all gleaming concrete and security cameras every 10 feet. The driver used a keycard to access a private elevator, and they all stepped inside. The bodyguard who'd been sitting next to Ethan pressed the button for the top floor, penthouse. Of course, the elevator was fast and silent, the kind of smooth ride that whispered money with every floor they passed. Ethan caught his reflection in the polished steel doors, a man in a worn work shirt standing among people in $1,000 suits. He looked exactly like what he was, someone who didn't belong. Ava was watching him. Having second thoughts? About 100 of them. Good. That means you're smart. She tilted her head. Stupid men don't last long in my world. And what world is that exactly? The elevator doors opened before she could answer. The penthouse was stunning in a way that made Ethan's studio apartment seem even more pathetic in comparison. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Lake Michigan, gray and churning under the winter sky. The furniture was modern and minimal, all clean lines and expensive materials. Art that Ethan suspected was original hung on the walls. Everything was white, black, or chrome. giving the space a cold, austere beauty. It looked like a place where no one actually lived, more like a very expensive prison. "Sophia," Ava said, addressing a woman who'd appeared from somewhere deeper in the apartment. Status report. The woman, Sophia, was in her mid-30s, with sharp features and sharper eyes. She wore a tailored suit and moved with the same controlled precision as the bodyguards. But there was something more to her. Intelligence. Authority. "Perimeter secure," Sophia reported. "No movement from Volkov's people since the incident. Marcus is still analyzing the attack vectors." Her gaze slid to Ethan. "Is this him? Ethan Parker, meet Sophia Russo, my second in command and the person who keeps me alive on a daily basis." Sophia's expression didn't change. "The waiter. The man who helped me when I needed it most," Ava corrected, and there was steel in her voice. "Show some respect." Sophia's eyebrow rose fractionally, but she nodded. "Mr. Parker, welcome." The word welcome sounded like it tasted bad in her mouth. "Thanks," Ethan said, because he had no idea what else to say. "Leave us," Ava told the bodyguards, "but stay close. And Sophia, have Marcus run a full background check on our friend Ethan here. I want to know everything." "Already done," Sophia said. "He's clean. No criminal record, no suspicious associations, no debt except to his landlord. He's exactly what he appears to be, a guy having a run of bad luck." "Good." Ava shrugged out of her coat and draped it over a chair. Underneath, she wore a black silk blouse and tailored pants that probably cost more than Ethan's monthly salary used to be. "Give us the room." Sophia hesitated, clearly not liking the idea of leaving Ava alone with a stranger. "Ma'am, I'll be fine, Sophia. He's not going to hurt me. It's not him I'm worried about hurting." Ava smiled at that, a real smile that softened her features. "Fair point. But still, privacy, please." Sophia left, but the look she gave Ethan on her way out made it clear that if anything happened to Ava, he wouldn't live long enough to regret it. When they were alone, Ava walked to the windows, looking out at the gray lake and grayer sky. Rain had started again, streaking the glass. "I was born into this life," she said quietly. "My father was Vincent Monroe. Maybe you've heard of him?" Ethan searched his memory. Vaguely. Something about organized crime. Something is an understatement. Vincent Monroe controlled half of Chicago's underground for 20 years. Drugs, gambling, construction contracts, unions. If there was money to be made through less than legal means, my father had a hand in it. She turned to face him. He also had enemies. A lot of them. What happened to him? Cancer, 2 years ago. Very undramatic for a man who lived such a dramatic life. Ava's smile was bitter. He left everything to me. His empire, his enemies, his wars. I was 23 years old. Ethan tried to wrap his mind around it. "You run. What exactly?" "Everything my father built plus what I've added. Legitimate businesses, mostly. Real estate, restaurants, a private security firm. But yes, there are still other operations. The kind that exist in gray areas." She met his eyes. "I'm not going to lie to you, Ethan. I'm not a good person by most standards. I've done things that would horrify you, ordered things that would disgust you. I exist in a world where violence is currency and trust is a liability. Then why am I here? Because in that world of violence and betrayal, you did something no one has done in a very long time. You showed me kindness without expecting anything in return. You saw a stranger who needed help and you helped. No questions, no conditions, no angle." Ava crossed the room until she was standing in front of him. "Do you know how rare that is? How impossible that seems from where I stand? I just bought you dinner. You spent your last dollar on someone you'd never see again. In my experience, people don't do that. People hoard what little they have. They protect themselves first. They certainly don't bankrupt themselves for a stranger." She reached out and touched his arm, a light touch that somehow felt weighted with significance. "You did, and that tells me something about who you are." Ethan's head was spinning. "You still haven't told me why I'm really here. You didn't bring me to your fortress in the sky just to thank me." "No," Ava agreed. "I brought you here because I want to offer you a job." "Doing what?" "I don't know anything about your world." "Exactly. That's what makes you valuable." Ava gestured to the pristine white couch and they both sat. "Everyone around me, Sophia, Marcus, my bodyguards, my business partners, they all have agendas. Loyalties that shift, angles they're working. I can't trust anyone completely because everyone wants something from me." "And you think you can trust me?" "I think you're the first person in 2 years who's wanted nothing from me, and that makes you either incredibly stupid or incredibly genuine." Sophia's background check suggests you're not stupid. So what, you want to hire me as your, what? Your moral compass? Ava laughed, a real laugh this time. God, no, I'm well past saving Ethan. No, I want to hire you as exactly what you are. Someone normal. Someone who exists outside this world of violence and paranoia. Someone who can tell me when I'm making a decision based on fear instead of logic. That sounds like a terrible job description. It probably is. But the pay is good. Very good. Enough to cover your rent. Enough to get your phone turned back on. Enough to eat something besides day-old diner food. Ethan's pride wanted to refuse, but his empty wallet had other ideas. What would I actually do? Stay close. Observe. Give me your honest opinion when I ask for it. Help me remember what it's like to be human instead of just surviving. Ava's expression was sincere in a way that made Ethan believe she was telling the truth. I know how that sounds, but I'm serious. Everyone around me lies. It's expected. Required, even. I need someone who doesn't. Why would you think I'd tell you the truth? Because lying requires knowing what someone wants to hear, and you have no idea what I want to hear. You don't know enough about my world to manipulate me. That's your value, Ethan. Your ignorance is more precious to me than expertise. It was the strangest job offer Ethan had ever received. It was also probably the most dangerous. What happened last night, he asked. You said someone tried to kill you. Ava's expression hardened. Someone has been trying to kill me for 6 months. His name is Marcus Volkov, Russian mob, recently relocated from New York. He wants Chicago, and I'm in his way. So this is a gang war. It's more complicated than that. Volkov doesn't just want territory. He wants to completely restructure how crime operates in this city. More violence, less subtlety, no rules. My father had codes, lines we didn't cross. Volkov has no such limitations. And last night, he found out where I was staying. Sent a team. They killed 3 of my people before I could escape. Her voice was flat, emotionless, but Ethan saw her hands clench. I've been moving between safe houses for weeks, sleeping 3 hours a night, trusting no one. And then I ended up in your diner, and you just helped. I'm sorry, Ethan said, and meant it. About your people. Ava looked at him with surprise. You're the first person to say that. Everyone else wants to know about tactical failures and security breaches. You're sorry about the people. Of course I am. They were people, weren't they? Yes, they were. She stood and walked back to the windows. Michael was 26, just married. Teresa had 2 kids in college. Dante was with my father for 15 years. He taught me how to shoot. Her reflection in the glass was ghostly, insubstantial. Their deaths are on me. That's on Volkov, not you. Is it? I'm the one they swore loyalty to. I'm the one who couldn't protect them. Ethan stood and joined her at the window, careful to maintain distance. You can't protect everyone. No one can. I'm supposed to try. They stood in silence, watching the rain. Below them, Chicago sprawled in all directions. Millions of people living their lives, completely unaware of the war being fought in the shadows. This job you're offering, Ethan said finally. It's dangerous, isn't it? Extremely. People might try to kill me. Almost certainly once they figure out you matter to me. And I'd be working for a crime boss. Technically, I prefer CEO of diversified interests. But yes, crime boss works. Ethan turned to look at her. Why does this feel like the best offer I've gotten in years? Ava met his eyes and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe. Recognition. Because we're both survivors, Ethan. We've both learned to keep going when everything says we should quit. The difference is I have resources. And you have something I lost a long time ago. What's that? Humanity. Before Ethan could respond, the door burst open. Sophia rushed in, her face tight with urgency. We have a problem. Ava's entire demeanor shifted instantly, from vulnerable to commanding in a heartbeat. What kind? Bomb threat. Someone called it in 5 minutes ago. They said there's a device in the building. SAWPD is evacuating. Could be a diversion, Ava said, already moving. To get me out in the open. That's what I thought. But the threat mentioned you by name. Said you have 20 minutes. Ethan's blood went cold. Wait, there's a bomb in this building? Maybe, Sophia said. Or maybe it's psychological warfare. Either way, we need to move. Now. Ava was pulling on her coat, her movements precise and controlled despite the crisis. Safe House 3. Is it still secure? As of this morning, yes, but we can't be sure anymore, I know. Ava turned to Ethan. I understand if you want to walk away right now. This is what my life looks like. Constant threats. Constant fear. No one would blame you for running. Ethan thought about his apartment, about Bernie's diner, about the safe, predictable misery of poverty. Then he thought about the look in Ava's eyes when she'd thanked him last night. "Where do we go?" he asked. Ava smiled. A real, genuine smile that transformed her face. "With me. Come on." They moved fast. Sophia was already on her phone, coordinating with someone. The bodyguards materialized from wherever they'd been waiting, forming a protective circle around Ava. Ethan found himself swept along in the controlled chaos down a different elevator. "Service entrance," Sophia explained curtly, through corridors he didn't recognize. They emerged in the parking garage where multiple vehicles were already idling. Sophia pushed Ethan toward a black SUV. "Get in. Now." He climbed in and Ava slid in beside him. Two bodyguards took the front seats. Another SUV pulled out ahead of them and a third fell in behind. "Go," Ava ordered, and they were moving. As they sped up the ramp and out into Chicago's rainy streets, Ethan looked back at the tower they'd just evacuated. Police cars were arriving, lights flashing. People were streaming out of the building. "Is there really a bomb?" he asked. "Maybe," Ava said. "Volkov likes psychological warfare, but we can't take chances." The SUVs moved through traffic with purpose, clearly following a predetermined route. Ethan watched the city pass, his city, the place he'd struggled to survive in for 5 years, and realized he was seeing it from a completely different perspective now. "You still haven't given me an answer," Ava said quietly. "About the job. You're asking me while we're fleeing a bomb threat? When else would I ask? This is my life, Ethan. This is what you're signing up for." He should say no. Every rational part of his brain said to run, to get out while he still could, to go back to his safe, miserable existence. But Ethan had stopped listening to the rational part of his brain the moment he'd spent his last dollar on a stranger. "How much does it pay?" he asked. Ava smiled. "Enough. More than enough." "And what happens if I say yes and then change my mind?" "Then you walk away." "I'm not a kidnapper, Ethan. You're free to leave whenever you want." "Would I be safe if I left?" Sophia answered from the front seat, not turning around. "Once you're in this world, safe is relative, but we'd make sure you were protected. New identity if necessary. Relocation assistance. We take care of our people. Even the ones who quit, even them," Ava confirmed. "I'm not my father, Ethan. I don't punish loyalty just because it ends." The SUVs turned onto Lakeshore Drive, heading north. The lake was choppy and dark, white caps visible even from the road. "Okay," Ethan heard himself say. "Okay, I'll do it." Ava exhaled, and he realized she'd been holding her breath. "Just like that? Just like that. I don't have anything to lose. And apparently, you've got a bomb threat to deal with. Seems like you could use all the help you can get." "That's not wrong," Sophia muttered. Ava laughed, a sound of genuine amusement and maybe relief. "Welcome aboard, Ethan Parker. Try not to die in the first week. I'll do my best." They drove for another 20 minutes, leaving the city proper and heading into the northern suburbs. The safe house turned out to be a nondescript 2-story home in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place that looked completely ordinary and therefore invisible. Inside was a different story. The windows were bulletproof. The doors were reinforced steel disguised as wood. There were security cameras covering every angle, and Sophia did a full sweep before allowing anyone to settle in. "We'll stay here until we know more," Ava said, removing her coat. "Marcus is checking the building. If there was a device, we'll know soon." Ethan stood in the living room, feeling completely out of his depth. 12 hours ago, he'd been counting tips at Bernie's diner. Now he was in a safe house with a mob boss and her armed security team. His life had become unrecognizable. "You look overwhelmed," Ava observed. "You think? Come on. Let me show you where you'll sleep. You should rest. It's been a long day, and it's about to get longer." She led him upstairs to a small bedroom that was clean and functional. There was a bed, a dresser, a window with heavy curtains. "Bathrooms across the hall," Ava said. "There are clothes in the closet that should fit. We keep supplies at all the safe houses. Help yourself to anything you need." "Thank you." Ava paused in the doorway. "Ethan, I meant what I said. You can still walk away. I'll have someone drive you home. No hard feelings." "And then what? I go back to my apartment that I'm getting evicted from? Back to counting change and wondering which meal to skip?" Ethan shook his head. "No thanks. I'd rather take my chances with you. Even knowing what I am, what I do, I don't really know what you do, not yet, but I know you needed help and I helped you. And now you're helping me. That seems Fair. Fair, Ava repeated like the word was foreign. No one's accused me of being fair in a long time. Maybe they should more often. She smiled at that. A small, sad smile. Get some rest, Ethan. We'll talk more when you wake up. After she left, Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, his mind racing. He should be terrified. He probably was terrified somewhere under the shock and adrenaline. But he was also excited? Alive in a way he hadn't felt in months? He pulled out his wallet and counted the bills again. $7.53. Everything he had in the world. He thought about what Ava had said. Enough pay to cover rent, to get his phone back, to eat real food. He thought about the alternative. Eviction, homelessness, the endless grind of poverty with no end in sight. He thought about Ava's eyes, haunted and hard and somehow still hopeful. Ethan lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. His old life was over. He'd made that choice the moment he'd gotten in that Mercedes. Now he just had to survive his new one. Downstairs he could hear voices, Sophia and Ava talking in low tones. Outside the rain continued, washing Chicago clean for another night. Ethan closed his eyes and wondered what tomorrow would bring. Ethan woke to the sound of voices arguing downstairs. For a disoriented moment he couldn't remember where he was. The bed was too comfortable, the sheets too soft, the room too quiet. Then memory crashed back. The safe house, the bomb threat, Ava Monroe, his new life. He checked the clock on the nightstand. 2:47 a.m. He'd slept for nearly 12 hours, his body finally surrendering to exhaustion he'd been carrying for months. The clothes Ava had mentioned were indeed in the closet, jeans that actually fit, a soft gray sweater, even new socks. Everything bore expensive labels he recognized from store windows he'd never been able to afford to enter. He dressed quickly and headed downstairs, following the voices to a room that had been converted into some kind of command center. Multiple monitors showed security camera feeds. Maps of Chicago covered one wall, marked with colored pins and notations Ethan didn't understand. Sophia and another man, 30s, sharp-featured, intense, were standing over a laptop, their body language tense. Ava sat in a chair by the window, silhouetted against the early morning darkness. She looked tired in a way that went beyond lack of sleep. There was no bomb, Sophia was saying. Marcus swept the entire building. Nothing. So it was a diversion, the man replied. Volkov wanted to flush us out, see where we'd run, which means he knows about this location now. Maybe. Or maybe he's just testing our responses. Ava spoke without turning from the window. Either way, we can't stay here long. How many safe houses do we have left that Volkov doesn't know about? 2, possibly 3, Sophia said. But we're running out of places to hide. I know. Ava's voice was flat, defeated in a way that made Ethan's chest ache. He cleared his throat and all three of them turned to look at him. Sophia's expression was unreadable. The man's was openly hostile. Ava's softened slightly. You're awake, she said. Good. Come meet Marcus. Not the Marcus who's trying to kill me. My Marcus. Head of security and general pain in my ass. The man didn't smile. Ma'am, we need to discuss the civilian. His name is Ethan, Ava said sharply. And he's not a civilian anymore. He's part of the team. With all due respect, he's a liability we can't afford right now. Noted. Dismissed. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he nodded curtly and left the room. Sophia lingered, her eyes on Ethan. Don't take it personally, she said. Marcus doesn't trust anyone. It's what makes him good at his job. And what about you? Ethan asked. Do you trust me? No, but Ava does. And that's what matters. Sophia gathered up some papers from the desk. I'll be upstairs if you need me. Don't do anything stupid. She left and Ethan found himself alone with Ava. Dawn was beginning to break outside, turning the sky from black to deep purple. Rain still fell, steady and relentless. Sorry about them, Ava said. They're protective. Can't blame them. I'm some random guy you picked up off the street. You're not random and I didn't pick you up. I'm repaying a debt. She stood and moved to where coffee was brewing. Want some? Please. They sat at a small table in the corner, nursing their coffee in silence. Ava looked different in the gray morning light. Younger, more vulnerable. The hard edges that defined her in public had softened. Tell me about your life, she said suddenly. Before all this, what were you like? Ethan shrugged. Not much to tell. Grew up in Cleveland. Dad left when I was 6. Mom did her best, but cancer took her when I was 22. No siblings. Came to Chicago because a buddy said there was construction work. There was, For a while. And then the company went under. Took my savings with it. They'd been skimming from our retirement accounts. By the time the lawsuit settled, there was nothing left. He took a sip of coffee. Spent the next few months applying for jobs, burning through what little I had saved. Eventually ended up at Bernie's. That must have been hard. The fall. The fall? Ethan laughed without humor. That implies I was somewhere high to begin with. I was always barely getting by. I just didn't realize it until I stopped getting by at all. Ava was watching him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. You're not bitter. What's the point? Being bitter doesn't pay rent. Most people would be angry. At the company, at the system, at the world. Oh, I'm angry, Ethan said. I'm furious. But anger doesn't change anything. You just keep going because the alternative is giving up. And you don't give up. No, I don't. He met her eyes. What about you? What were you like before all this? Ava's expression closed off slightly. I don't really remember. My father started training me young. By the time I was 10, I knew more about his business than most adults. By 15, I was sitting in on meetings. By 20, I was his most trusted advisor. She stared into her coffee. I never had a choice about this life. It was always what I was going to be. That's sad. Is it? Most people would kill for the power I have. Power isn't the same as freedom. You're trapped in this just like I was trapped in poverty. Different cage. Same bars. Ava looked at him with something like wonder. Sophia was right. You're dangerous. How am I dangerous? I'm probably the least dangerous person you know. That's exactly why. You see things clearly. You're not impressed by the money or the power or the fear. You just see me. She stood abruptly. I need to check the perimeter. Stay inside. Don't open any doors or windows. She left before Ethan could respond, and he was alone with his coffee and his thoughts. The next 3 days fell into a strange routine. Ethan mostly stayed in the safe house while Ava, Sophia, and Marcus came and went, handling business he wasn't privy to. He learned the rhythms of their operation, the security checks every 2 hours, the encrypted phone calls, the late-night meetings in the command center. He also learned about Ava. She was meticulous, reviewing every decision 3 times before acting. She cared about her people, checking in on the families of the 3 who'd died, making sure they were taken care of financially. She was ruthless when necessary, but never cruel. There was a logic to her violence that Ethan found both admirable and terrifying. And she was lonely, desperately, achingly lonely. It showed in the way she lingered when they talked, like she was starved for genuine conversation, in the way she asked his opinion on things that had nothing to do with her business, movies, books, what he thought about the weather, in the way she smiled when he made her laugh like she'd forgotten how. On the 4th night, Ethan found her in the command center at 3 a.m., staring at security feeds with red-rimmed eyes. You should sleep, he said. Can't. Too much to monitor. Sophia and Marcus can monitor. That's literally their job. They need rest too. Ethan pulled up a chair beside her. So does everyone, including you. I'll sleep when Volkov's dead. That might be a while. Ava laughed tiredly. Probably. They sat in silence, watching the camera feeds cycle through different angles of the house and surrounding streets. Rain continued to fall, as it had for days. Chicago in late winter was relentlessly gray. Can I ask you something? Ethan said. Sure. Why do you do this? I mean, you've got money. You could walk away, start over somewhere else. Why stay in a life that's trying to kill you? Ava was quiet for a long time. Because these people, Sophia, Marcus, the others, they depend on me. Because my father built something and I'm not going to let Volkov destroy it because... She trailed off. Because I don't know how to be anyone else. This is all I am. I don't believe that. You should. She finally turned to look at him. I've killed people, Ethan. Not directly, but I've given orders. I've ruined lives. Destroyed families. I'm not a good person. Neither am I. You spent your last dollar on a stranger, and you took in a homeless guy and gave him a job. We're both just trying to survive the best way we know how. Ava stared at him, and something shifted in her expression. When did you get so wise? I'm not wise. I'm just too tired to lie. She smiled at that, a real smile that made her look her age. 25, not the ancient, weary leader she usually seemed. I'm glad you're here, she said softly. Even if it's dangerous, even if it's stupid, I'm glad. Me too. The moment stretched between them, charged with something Ethan didn't want to name. Then Ava's phone buzzed, shattering it. She checked the screen and swore. Volkov's people hit one of our warehouses. South Side. 3 dead. Millions in product gone. I'm sorry. It's war. People die in war. But her hands were shaking as she typed a response. I need to go. Stay here with Marcus. Don't leave the house. Ava. Promise me, Ethan. Don't leave. I promise. She grabbed her coat and was gone within minutes. Sophia and half the security team with her. The house felt empty without her. Echoing and cold. Marcus appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. She trusts you. I know. Don't make me regret not putting a bullet in you the first day. Wasn't planning on it. Marcus studied him for a long moment. You care about her. It wasn't a question, but Ethan answered anyway. Yeah, I do. That's going to get you killed. People she cares about die. It's a pattern. Thanks for the warning. I'm serious. Volkov will figure out you matter to her. And when he does, you'll become a target. A tool to hurt her. Marcus moved closer. So I'm telling you now, if you care about her at all, walk away. Before it's too late. And if I don't want to, then you're a fool. But at least you'll be a dead fool who saw it coming. Marcus left, and Ethan sat alone in the command center, watching the rain fall on empty streets. He should leave. Marcus was right. This was only going to end badly. But Ethan had spent months being invisible, forgotten, a ghost in his own life. Ava saw him, really saw him. And he saw her. Not the crime boss, not the feared Mafia Queen, but the lonely young woman who'd been forced into a role she never wanted. He wasn't going anywhere. Ava returned at dawn, exhausted and covered in someone else's blood. Ethan was waiting in the living room, unable to sleep. When she walked in, his heart jumped into his throat. Are you hurt? He demanded, already moving toward her. Not my blood, she said dully. Carlos, one of our drivers. Volkov's people shot him in front of me. As a message. Jesus, Ava. I'm fine. I need to shower, change. Pretend I'm human for a few more hours. She started toward the stairs, then stopped. Thank you. For what? For waiting up. For caring, for... She shook her head. Just thank you. She disappeared upstairs, and Ethan heard the shower start. He made coffee because he didn't know what else to do. When Ava came down 20 minutes later, hair wet, dressed in clean clothes, face scrubbed of makeup and blood, she looked impossibly young and impossibly tired. Talk to me, she said, sitting on the couch. About anything. I need to think about something other than death for 5 minutes. So Ethan talked. He told her about growing up in Cleveland, about his mother's terrible cooking and worse jokes, about the summer he was 16 and worked at a movie theater, sneaking into different films on his breaks, about small, normal things that seemed impossibly distant from their current reality. Ava listened, her eyes closed, a small smile on her face. Eventually, she fell asleep sitting up, her head tilting toward his shoulder. Carefully, Ethan adjusted so she could rest more comfortably. He sat there barely breathing while Ava Monroe, feared Mafia Queen, ruler of Chicago's underworld, slept with her head on his shoulder. Sophia found them like that an hour later. She stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable. She trusts you, Sophia said quietly, echoing Marcus's words. I know. Don't break that trust. She's had enough people betray her. I won't. Good. Sophia moved closer, her voice dropping even lower. She's falling for you. You know that, right? Ethan's heart stuttered. Don't play dumb. I've known Ava for 5 years. I've never seen her look at anyone the way she looks at you. Sophia's expression was fierce. So I need to know, are you falling for her too? Because if this is just gratitude or curiosity or whatever, end it now. She can't afford to be vulnerable right now. Not with Volkov circling. Ethan looked down at Ava's sleeping face, peaceful in a way she never was when awake. Yeah, he admitted. I'm falling for her. Then God help you both, Sophia said. Because this isn't going to end well. She left, and Ethan sat there holding the most dangerous woman in Chicago, feeling her breathe against his shoulder, and knew with absolute certainty that he was in over his head. He didn't care. For the first time in months, maybe years, he felt like he mattered, like his life had purpose beyond just surviving another day. If that meant danger, so be it. Ava stirred, her eyes opening slowly. For a moment she looked confused. Then she realized where she was, whose shoulder she'd been sleeping on, and pulled back quickly. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. It's okay, Ethan said. You needed rest. They looked at each other, and the air between them felt electric, charged with everything unspoken. Ethan, Ava whispered. This is dangerous. What's happening between us? It can't. I know. People I care about die. I know that too. Then why are you still here? Because I'd rather be here with you than safe and alone. Ava's breath caught. She reached out, her fingers brushing his cheek. You're either very brave or very stupid. Probably both. She laughed, soft and sad. Then, before either of them could think better of it, she leaned in and kissed him. It was gentle at first, tentative, testing, then deeper, more urgent, like they were both drowning, and each other was air. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Ava rested her forehead against his. This is a mistake, she whispered. Probably. Volkov will use you against me. Let him try. Ethan. The window exploded inward in a shower of glass. Ethan's training, all 0 seconds of it, failed him completely. Ava moved on instinct, tackling him to the floor as bullets tore through the air where they'd been sitting. The room erupted in chaos. Alarms screaming, more windows shattering, voices shouting. Stay down, Ava yelled. She had a gun in her hand. Where had that come from? And was returning fire with terrifying precision. Marcus burst in from the back. Sophia from upstairs, both armed and moving like soldiers. The attack lasted maybe 90 seconds, but felt like hours. Then silence, broken only by the alarm and their ragged breathing. Everyone alive? Marcus called. Here, Sophia responded. I'm good, Ava said. Then to Ethan, you okay? Ethan did a mental inventory. Terrified, ears ringing, probably going into shock, but physically intact. Yeah, I think so. They found us, Marcus said grimly, checking the bodies of the attackers. Volkov's men, professional hit team. How? Ava demanded. Does it matter? We need to move. Now. They evacuated within minutes, leaving the safe house behind. As they drove through Chicago's pre-dawn streets, Ethan caught Ava's eye in the rearview mirror. She'd almost died. They'd both almost died. And somehow, impossibly, all Ethan could think about was that kiss. This was his life now. Violence and danger, and a woman he was falling in love with despite every rational reason not to. He should be terrified. Instead, he felt more alive than he had in years. The new safe house was farther out, a cabin on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by bare trees and February snow. It should have felt safer. Instead, Ethan felt like they were running out of places to run. 3 days after the attack, Sophia found him on the porch watching the sun set through skeletal branches. You should come inside, she said. It's not safe out here. Is it safe anywhere? Sophia sat beside him, her breath fogging in the cold air. Ethan, I need to tell you something about Ava. What about her? She's making mistakes, taking risks she normally wouldn't, and it's because of you. Ethan's chest tightened. What do you mean? She's distracted, worried about keeping you safe instead of focusing on Volkov. Yesterday, she almost walked into an ambush because she was checking her phone to see if you'd texted. Sophia's voice was gentle but firm. I'm not saying you're bad for her. I'm saying that in this world, love is a liability. It gets people killed. So what are you suggesting? I leave? I'm suggesting you be careful. Both of you. Sophia stood. Volkov's not stupid. He's watching, waiting for an opening. Don't give him one. She went inside, leaving Ethan alone with the cold and his thoughts. That night, Ava found him in the small bedroom he'd been staying in. She knocked softly before entering. Can't sleep? She asked. Too much on my mind. She sat on the edge of the bed. In the dim lamplight, she looked vulnerable. No armor, no mask. Just a young woman carrying too much weight. Sophia talked to you, Ava said. It wasn't a question. Yeah, she's right, you know. Us, it's dangerous. For both of us. I know. Then why don't you leave? I'd give you money, a new identity. You could start over somewhere safe. Ethan turned to face her. Do you want me to leave? No, she admitted. But I should want you to. That's the problem. Ava, I've spent the last year feeling invisible, like I didn't matter to anyone, including myself. And then I met you, and suddenly I matter. I have a purpose. I feel alive. He reached for her hand. I'm not leaving. Not unless you tell me you don't feel the same way. I can't tell you that, because I do. Her voice cracked. I'm falling in love with you, Ethan, and it terrifies me. Good. I'm terrified too. We can be terrified together. She laughed through tears and kissed him. It was different from the first time. Slower, deeper, weighted with the knowledge of what they were risking. When they finally pulled apart, Ava rested her head on his shoulder. Promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll run if things go wrong. That you won't try to be a hero. Ava, promise me. Please. I promise. Ethan lied. Volkov made his move 2 days later. Ethan had gone into town with Marcus to pick up supplies. A simple errand that should have been routine. They were loading groceries into the SUV when the van pulled up. Marcus saw it first. Get down. The tranquilizer dart hit him before he could finish. He collapsed, and Ethan barely had time to register what was happening before someone grabbed him from behind. He fought, instinct overriding fear, but there were too many of them. A cloth pressed over his face, chemicals sweet and suffocating. The world went dark. Ethan woke in a warehouse. His head pounded and his hands were zip-tied to a chair. The space was massive, old industrial, probably abandoned. Snow fell through holes in the roof. A man stood in front of him. 50s, gray hair, expensive suit, cold eyes that held no mercy. Ethan Parker, the man said with a Russian accent. The waiter who captured the Queen's heart. How romantic. Volkov, you know me, good. That saves time. Volkov circled him like a predator. She's coming for you. Ava. She'll trade herself for you because that's who she is. Sentimental. Weak. She's not weak. No? She let you live. That's weakness in my world. Volkov stopped in front of him. I'm going to kill her. And you're going to watch. Then I'm going to kill you, but first we wait. Ava received the video 20 minutes after Ethan was taken. Volkov standing over Ethan's unconscious body. You have 3 hours. Come to the address I'm sending. Come alone. Or he dies slowly. Sophia grabbed her arm as Ava stood. It's a trap. I know. You can't go. That's exactly what he wants. And if I don't, Ethan dies. Ava's voice was steel. That's not happening. Ava, listen to me. No, you listen. Ava turned to face her team. Sophia, Marcus, recovered from the tranquilizer, and the others. Volkov thinks I'm weak because I love someone. He thinks that makes me predictable. Let's show him how wrong he is. She laid out the plan. It was risky, requiring perfect timing and a lot of luck. But it was their only chance. This is insane, Marcus said when she finished. Probably, but it's also going to work. Ava met each of their eyes. Volkov wants a queen. Let's give him one. 2 hours later, Ava walked into the warehouse alone. At least that's what it looked like. Ava Monroe, Volkov called from the shadows. Punctual, I appreciate that. Let him go. Of course, after we discuss terms. Volkov stepped into the light. You abdicate. Publicly. Give me control of your entire operation. Then I'll consider letting the waiter live. Ethan, now conscious and bleeding from a split lip, tried to speak. Ava, don't. One of Volkov's men hit him, and rage flashed through Ava's eyes. Hurt him again and there's no deal, she said coldly. You're in no position to make threats. Aren't I? Ava smiled, and it was terrifying. You think I came alone? You think I'm that stupid? Volkov's expression flickered, the first hint of uncertainty. Sophia? Ava said calmly. The warehouse lights cut out. In the darkness, chaos erupted. Gunfire, shouting, the sound of bodies hitting concrete. Sophia and the team had been positioned for hours, waiting for Ava's signal. They moved with surgical precision, taking out Volkov's men, securing the exits, controlling the space. When the emergency lights came on, Volkov stood surrounded, his men unconscious or fleeing. Ava had a gun pointed at his head. You made a mistake, Ava said quietly. You thought love made me weak, but it made me desperate. And desperate people are the most dangerous of all. Sophia cut Ethan's restraints while Marcus secured Volkov. What now? Volkov snarled. You'll kill me? Make me a martyr? No, I'm going to do something worse. Ava lowered the gun. I'm going to let you live, but you're leaving Chicago. Tonight. And if you ever come back, if you ever threaten anyone I care about again, I won't be this merciful. You're making a mistake. Maybe. But it's my mistake to make. She gestured to Marcus. Get him out of my city. As Marcus dragged Volkov away, Ava ran to Ethan. He was battered and bruised, but alive. You came, he said, voice hoarse. Of course I came. I promised to protect you. You promised I'd run if things went wrong. You promised that. I didn't. She touched his face gently. Are you okay? Better now. They stood there, holding each other in a warehouse that smelled like gunpowder and fear, while around them Sophia's team secured the scene. This isn't over, Sophia warned. Volkov has allies. This war could continue. Let it, Ava said. I'm done running. Done hiding. We fight on our terms now. 6 months later, Ethan stood on the balcony of Ava's penthouse. Their penthouse now. watching Chicago wake up. The city sparkled in the summer sun, so different from the gray winter when they'd met. Volkov had kept his word, retreating to New York. There had been smaller conflicts, minor threats, but nothing like before. Ava had restructured her operations, going more legitimate, cutting ties with the worst elements of her father's empire. It wasn't perfect. It was still dangerous, but it was theirs. Coffee? Ava appeared beside him, 2 mugs in hand. Thanks. They stood together, comfortable in silence. Ethan had learned the business, not the violent parts, but the strategy, the negotiations, the careful balance Ava maintained. He'd become her advisor in truth, offering perspectives no one else could. Any regrets? Ava asked. About what? This, us, the life you gave up for me. Ethan thought about Bernie's diner, about counting change and sleeping hungry, about feeling invisible and forgotten. Not even one, he said. Ava leaned into him, and he wrapped his arm around her. Below them, Chicago lived and breathed, 8 million people going about their days, unaware of the quiet war that had been fought in their shadows. I love you, Ava said quietly. I love you too. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. They still faced danger. They still had enemies. The life they'd chosen was complicated and messy and would probably get them both killed eventually, but they faced it together. And for now, that was enough.